Chapter 31. Jim, Garfield, and Ulysses talk on the phone. Jim Garfield sat in Tiffany Ankle's V-room casually performing a variety of exercise with a 50-pound dumbbell. He ran 16 channels on 3 walls, and the audio feed was the story of a Brazilian school for plastic surgeons that converted genetically malformed dogs into creatures with humanoid faces. Pugs with eyes that did not drop or sag. Pugs with European eyes and other pugs with Mongolian eyes. Pekingese with prosthetic noses that look cartoonish but human. The dean of the medical school spoke enthusiastically about the possibilities for patients disfigured by trauma or fire. Jim Garfield was awaiting a call from Ulysses, and he paused part of his viewing mind to reconsider Ulysses' motives. He would want cash, of course, the nature of the beast. But what else would he demand? Employment? Partnership? Servitude? It was the what else that worried Jim Garfield. Jim Garfield would gladly pay Ulysses to quietly move on, but he probably wanted more than just money. Ulysses liked being the big shot. He liked risk and reward and adventure. But no matter how clever he might be, Jim Garfield knew he always had to distance himself from Ulysses. Ulysses was just too unpredictable. Jim Garfield had learned a lot from the Johnsons, and consequently, he constructed his business more like a terror cell organization than a crime family. His was a system where face-to-face meetings between workers were minimized, and true names and residences and backgrounds were rarely known except to the upper echelons of the organization. One could not simply plug a high-profile ex-probation officer into middle management without polluting the entire system. Jim Garfield thought back to his prison days when he and Ray and David Hunter Duncan and a few other scholars used to discuss the perfect crime and the perfect organization. They all agreed that the terror cell model offered a better organizational paradigm than the traditional crime gang. Gangs satisfied psychological needs. Every gangster was a lonely, tough guy, and the pack identity and camaraderie addressed those needs. But gangsters were sitting ducks. It didn't matter if it was a street gang or a bike gang or a crime family. They all advertised their existence and knew too much about other members' business. Okay for a college frat, not okay for a criminal enterprise. And the clique the other inmates called the scholars would formulate guidelines for building a criminal enterprise, completely unaware that a Harris County parole officer by the name of Tecumseh Sherman Johnson Sr. had a similar prototype in place for over a decade. And the scholars might not have known about the invisible Johnson Empire had they not been recruited into the organization and had not Senior Johnson's younger son displayed a manic episode in which he revealed significant details to Jim Garfield and Mary Elizabeth Jones and a few other select parties. Jim Garfield would learn later that it wasn't coincidence that he and Ray and David Hunter Duncan had all been assigned Ulysses Johnson as their parole officer, or community supervisor as they preferred to be called. The Johnsons scoured the prisons in search of talented criminals who could keep their mouths shut and who were not racist in the Aryan sense of the term. Ulysses had used a proxy to recruit Ray, but he recruited Jim Garfield personally. He showed up at his apartment dressed like Dracula with a 12-pack under his arm. Now, the most unforgettable character Jim Garfield had ever met would soon be talking to him on the phone. Suddenly, the channel providing the audio feed on the panorama cut away from the cosmetically butchered canines for a live report from Memphis. The city of Memphis had fallen prey to a chemical attack in broad daylight. Every other news channel followed suit. Wait a second. David Hunter Duncan and Ray had both gone to Memphis, and they both asked Jim Garfield to keep that matter secret. Holy shit. Those questions David Hunter Duncan had been asking about the prisoners in Waller County. Jim Garfield never thought that they would attempt anything so bold. His heart thumped like a Buddy Rich solo. The cell rang the theme from the good, the bad, and the ugly. It was Ulysses. "What's up?" Jim Garfield answered with his fist full of dollars, Clint Eastwood. Ulysses Johnson responded with a Barack Obama simulator that made Jim Garfield cover his mouthpiece and moan. "Let's get down to business," Ulysses intoned with an infected Ivy League speech. "Okay," Jim Garfield replied. "I like your directness." "I want you to know that I have nothing but respect for you and your friends," Ulysses Obama articulated. With that statement, the news channel cut to footage of a tall man in a scuba suit fleeing the area of chemical attack. That had to be Ray. Shit. A tall man won't tip off anyone. But if he's accompanied by an average-sized guy with a pronounced left leg limp, the whole damn world would know who's behind the chemical attack. And I want you to know that I respect you, and I am forever grateful for all that you have done for me over the years. I haven't paid tribute to your return, but that's only because your homecoming took me off guard, Jim Garfield countered. With the pleasantries out of the way, Ulysses Obama made a few requests. He wanted Jim Garfield to create a cover for him so that he could play the role of a corporate jet setter and rent one of those short-term luxury apartments. If Jim Garfield could provide personal ID, corporate ID, and 3 months' rent, as well as 3 months' rent at an off-site office with a short commute, Ulysses Johnson would be ever so grateful. Jim Garfield reminded his chatmate that he simply was not as prosperous as he seemed to think he was. He also reminded Ulysses that he was now the sole supporter of his son's mother, and this devoted mother also had an older son whose father was, unfortunately, no longer able to provide monetary support. Yes, he could provide corporate and personal ID that would not set off alarms, and he was willing to pay 1 month rent of 1 month of rent at the luxury apartment and another month's rent at the office, but he simply had no more funds to tap into. There was a pause before a sincere-sounding Obama asked, "What do you think about the situation in Memphis?" Jim Garfield paused before answering with Clint Eastwood minimalism that seemed to fit his chosen synthesizer. "That's some wild shit." As the news channel showed the tall man flee into the thick cloud of white smoke, the Obama voice punctuated the action. "How is your right-hand man these days?" "Please, no names," the Clint Eastwood voice blurted. "I did not use proper nouns." The Eastwood voice paused before continuing. "Let's keep it that way. But I have heard that he is keeping busy and he's making things happen. Could he maybe help me out with a couple of months' rent that you're unable to provide?" Jim Garfield's mind raced even faster than his heart. Was it coincidence that Ulysses was referencing Ray as images of Ray in a scuba suit are projected around the world? The Johnsons had eyes and ears everywhere, but Ulysses was cut off from those sensors. And not even the Johnsons knew the Memphis attack was on its way. It was all coincidence. It had to be. "I'll talk to my friend. I'm certain he will want to help you, if he can do so." "Good. And I have to inquire about your other friend as well." As Ulysses Obama spoke, the news channels showed a second man in a scuba suit, darting through traffic on a child scooter. Of course, this is how he disguised his limp. A scooter. Don't crash. Don't crash. Don't crash. The scooter disappeared into the same white smoke cumulus that had swallowed the tall guy before him. "My other friend? He's doing okay. I understand the fortunes have been good. Maybe he can... Jim Garfield concluded the conversation by agreeing to pay 3 months' rent at a luxury apartment, 3 months at an office yet to be located, to provide Ulysses with an automobile befitting a corporate executive, identification, a driver's license, as well as some spending money. He would later reflect that this was the worst deal he had ever closed. For the time being, he did not care. He only hoped that Ray and David Hunter Duncan made it home safely, without leaving a million breadcrumbs on their trail.